On the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz comes an unprecedented exhibition about one of history's darkest moments. Auschwitz, not long ago, not far away, features more than 500 original objects, first-hand accounts, and survivor testimonies that tell the powerful story of the Auschwitz concentration camp, its history and legacy, and the underlying conditions that allowed the Holocaust to happen. On now exclusively at ROM. Tickets at rom.ca.
Hey everybody, we're the Benchwarmers. I'm Jamie. I'm here with my co-host Gabe. Gabe, hailing from an undisclosed Muskoka location as we start to enjoy our summer. How you doing, buddy?
Good. I'm at training at the Gary Roberts hockey training facility this weekend.
Okay.
I'm not actually. I'm away with my family,
Yeah.
but we're doing good. It's we're entering, I guess, sort of the heat of the summer. We are not a people that thrive in the heat, let alone the humidity. But to be up north is nice. We've got a lot of in the sports world to talk about.
Let's get right into it. I think the most exciting story for Jewish sports fans in the last few weeks has been the drafting of two Jewish basketball players by the Brooklyn Nets. I'm talking, of course, about Ben Saraf and Danny Wolf, who were both drafted in the late first round by the Nets.
Both Jewish and both represent Israel internationally.
That's right.
So not just Jewish, but capital I Israeli.
Yeah. Ben was picked 26th and Danny was picked 27th in the first round by the Nets. Danny is American, but has played for Team Israel. Ben is I think he was born in South Africa actually, but grew up in Israel and has played basketball in Germany. We're very excited to be joined by Nick Agar-Johnson of No Ceilings to talk about how they project out as prospects and what we can expect from them. But pretty exciting stuff to have two Jews drafted in the first round of the NBA draft, eh?
It took me a while to understand throughout the interview. It dawned on me at the end of the interview what No Ceilings meant. It's a pretty good name for his publication. Yes, I would say that we hope there are no ceilings for Danny and Ben. I feel like now, just because they're two Jewish players being drafted to the same place, that their careers will be intertwined forever now. Like they're not just two guys going into the NBA; they are going like as mishpucha. So it's going to be really interesting to follow them too. Like I'm curious to know what their relationship with each other is like at this moment.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, they're two guys from different backgrounds. Going to play in basketball for the first time as pros in the NBA. Like, there's a lot of transition, but I agree. They're sort of interlinked in that way. Whether or not they want to be, that's sort of their fate. And I think there's a lot of Jewish sports fans around the world who are pretty excited about watching them. Would have been excited about watching them wherever they go, but especially excited seeing them go to Brooklyn. And you and I have talked about this in the past. Like, if you are a city with any Jews at all, especially I've heard that there's Jews in Brooklyn. I've been there. Yeah. I'm not there. I'm not going to investigate.
I can jump in with a story here. About 10 years ago, Jamie and I were walking down the street in Brooklyn, in South Williamsburg, known for their, an abundance of payas and Shabbat sirens and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And we saw a butcher shop called the Satmar Meat Market. And Jamie said, loud enough for anyone on the street to hear, this whole damn borough is the Satmar Meat Market. Am I right?
Yeah, and I haven't been allowed back east of the East River since.
After the divorce, after you got kicked out of Kiryas Yol for speaking English, you can't go back.
We laugh. Luckily, none of the Satmars will listen to this podcast, so we won't get in trouble.
If they did, they wouldn't be Satmars for much longer.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I hope they, but time to start reading English, buddy, and watching NBA games. There are a lot of Jews in Brooklyn, some of whom are probably basketball fans. Let's put it that way. Yeah. Some of whom may not be, or not allowed to be due to cultural and religious restrictions. But lots of Jews in Brooklyn, lots of Jewish basketball fans in Brooklyn. I think this is exciting. To be able to go cheer on Jewish players is a huge deal. I think, especially for kids, to be able to know that somebody shares something with you. Shares cultural identity, I think is hugely impactful. I think
It's
there's
incredibly important. The street ball, the children's street ball scene in New York is still thriving.
sure.
And to have, a little kid with his pass go, "I'm Danny Wolf," before he jacks up a three. That's good
Right.
stuff.
So it's not exactly when the game was ours. Back in the 1940s and 50s, CCNY dominance, but still, it's nice to have some round ball glory in New York for the first time. I guess first time since Amari was with the Knicks and started his journey return to Judaism. I guess that was that pretty much started at that time that he started talking about his I guess past with I don't know exactly what the term is. It wasn't exactly Hebrew nationalism, but regardless,
Yes.
he talked about his family being descended from Hebrews, and that led to a embrace of Judaism that has carried on to this day. I don't think it was apparent as much when he was with the
Hebrew
Knicks.
nationalism is an addiction to eating hot dogs. But do you follow Amari on social media?
Oh yeah, he's doing a parsha every week. It's great.
Every week. If you want Amari Stoudemire to tell you his interpretation of that week's parsha,
yeah,
it is
great.
on Instagram every single week.
Yeah, and if you told me 20
takes.
If you told me 20 years ago that the guy getting passes from Steve Nash in the dunk contest was going to be giving me my weekly Dvar Torahs, would have been shocked. But here we are. It's a crazy world in the Big 25.
And he's got some insight into it. It is a crazy world out here in the Big 25. Amari still hangs out at yeshiva basketball games. You know, the dude is for the culture being Judaism.
So it is, the NBA season just ended. The NBA playoffs just ended. It is a few months before we get into the basketball season. Summer League is starting soon. I believe Danny's going to be there, as Nick mentioned to us. He's going to watch, which is insane because it's in Vegas, and I can only imagine it's hot enough to fry an egg.
We are a desert people, however.
Yeah, we are. Nevertheless, I don't want to be in Vegas in mid-July. And, we'll obviously be checking in on Ben and Danny throughout the year. They're, the best Jewish players in the NBA right now. Sorry, the biggest, Jewish story in the NBA right now. Obviously, Danny Avdia has been a, highlight for the last couple years. And
now I'm excited for the first Danny v. Denny game.
That's true. I guess they'll play twice next year, but that'll be exciting. So let's move on from the NBA, and I want to talk about golf a little bit because it's been an exciting few weeks in golf. Unfortunately, no wins, but a couple real close top 10 finishes and all that. The first thing I want to talk about is Max Grazerman. Max, we talked about a lot before, had this long sort of build up to his career. And 2 weeks ago at the Rocket Classic in Detroit, tied for second in a playoff, a 5-hole playoff, and he lost on the 5th hole.
It was a massive playoff. And Grazerman, he was stepping out of his shoes. He was playing aggressive. He was pounding the ball, but it just didn't happen for him.
That's right. So sad to see that. It was his 4th runner-up appearance, 4th runner-up placement in the last year or so. He had this really great rookie season in the PGA Tour. There are some more events towards the end of the year. He is qualified for the British Open. Like he's going to be in the FedEx Cup.
He's probably.
Playoffs.
I mean, I think now after this, he's guaranteed his card for another year on the PGA Tour.
Yeah, so his ranking is increasing, and that's exciting to see. Getting that first win is huge. 3-year exemption. Really being in the mix, getting to play all the majors the following year, all that. Again, he's doing that without having the win. He's got everything but the win really right now. 50th in the FedEx Cup, or 49th in the FedEx Cup rankings, and getting pretty close to getting there. So I really am hoping for him that he can hold on to this and hopefully have a good showing at the British Open and the Scottish Open. I guess I think he's playing Scottish this week.
Yeah, I think they pretty much the whole world top 50 is.
Pretty much everyone who's playing the British is playing the Scottish, I think.
And that doesn't include Max Homa, unfortunately.
Right. And so that's the other story that we should talk about, which is Max Homa was among 2 Jewish golfers who were really in the mix at the John Deere Classic in it's Quad Cities. I can't remember. Is it in Davenport, Iowa? It's one of the Quad Cities.
Something like that.
It's one of the Quad Cities. It's real John Deere country over there. So Max Homa was playing great golf. It's his best golf he's played really in 2 years, I would say at a minimum. He shot a 63. That was the best round he had shot. He just shot a 63 on Thursday. Was in the top 5 basically the entire run. had a bit of a more
Had
up
to
and
share
down.
the lead for a brief moment on Sunday.
Yeah, had to share the lead for a brief moment on Sunday and just sort of fell off in the last few holes. Ended up 2 shots back of the winners. But again, a top 5 finish for Max. That's something to build on. I think he has.
I think it's his first of the year, which is finally.
Yeah. And he had good success at the Masters and the PGA Championship at times, but the stringing 4 solid rounds together has been something that's eluded him. And, to have 4 rounds under par, again, he was 16 under. That can win a tournament. It's bad luck or good luck to not get there. Finish in 5th, tied for 5th place is big. And the other surprise contender at the John Deere was David Lipsky. David is a fringe tour player. He is ranked somewhere in the hundreds or 200, but because of the way the PGA field sort of works, he ends up playing in more events than not. But had really been struggling this year to get any purchase. He had finished. I think he finished runner up maybe last year. He was at Procore. Was that last year or 2024 or 2025? I can't recall. But he had missed the last 5 cuts in events that he had played. He had just a few, top 10s in alternate events last year.
He's a grinder. He's making a living.
Yeah, but he was tied for the lead, and he was in the final group on Sunday and was tied for the lead going into the 18th after making an eagle on 16 to get that lead. Sorry, on 17. On 17 hit an eagle, but then bogeyed 18, lipped out a putt that would have tied him for the lead in the playoff. So ended up in third place because there was a 2-way tie for a playoff. Again, you hope this is something you can build on. It's going to be, I guess, a few alternate events. Probably, I assume he's playing the alternate events. Maybe not this week because of fatigue from finishing so late on Sunday. But I guess we'll see. And this is someone who's a grinder. Has never had a win on the PGA Tour. Had some success years ago on the Asian Tour, but this is how you play. He's playing for his card, basically. He'll get into. I think he'll just get into the FedEx Cup first, like the first tournament, and then you have a chance to play your way in. You have a chance to play yourself into a significant amount of money and a lot of exemption as well. If you get in the top, whatever it is, top 30 for most things, I think, or even.
So it's the top
anyways,
30. The top 70 is where the real money starts, and then the top 30 is to the final week. Lipsky, I think he's.
But I think
the
top 30 gives you a fair amount of exemptions for the majors the following year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He is getting there now. Right now, his ranking, he is 115th, which would be like right on the bubble. These points are probably helpful, but at the next 2 events, he could certainly still play his way into the playoffs. But by the same token, we've got one other Jewish golfer playing in the Scottish Open right now. And I think he still has a chance to qualify for the British, and that's Daniel Berger.
Yeah. No, I think he's qualified for the British because of how he did last year.
So he's already qualified. Okay.
Yeah. Because I know the Scottish is like the last chance to qualify. Yeah, that's right. Graysman and Berger should both be in the Scottish Open. Haven't seen anyone else that I've noticed as a qualifier. Berger, it's been a real comeback year for him. He's ranked 31st in the world now. Had that third at the RBC Heritage after really contending. He's right there. He's close. He's hitting the ball. He's striking the ball great. Excited to see what he can do. Hasn't played a ton since the US. I think he just played the Travelers. Hopefully he's rested up.
Yep.
And ready to go.
So before we get to our interview with NBA Johnson, and we'll get to discussing why he's called that when the radio comes, but should cover the last major sport. We should sort of, I guess the right term would be to give a yurtside right now for the career of a former Blue Jay and a former Jewish hero. The very recently retired, yet still not from international baseball, still planning to play for Israel next year. Kevin Pillar retired this week.
That's right. I think for Jays fans of a certain age, will always remember his, daring feats in the outfield. There's some clips that, like, I would say, I watch every at least once a year of him making grabs.
To remember Kevin Pillar, his Spider-Man catch and so on. I will always remember Kevin Pillar for unironically wearing one of those like Superman Jewish Star T-shirts that you get on the street in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
He used to wear that under his jersey to, show his pride. He played in Toronto, he played in Boston, played in LA, played in Dallas. Lots of cities where he had a lot of Jewish fans. We will like Kevin for a while. We used to call him the Dybbuk, because he stole hits like a Dybbuk steals souls.
That's right. As someone who sort of never developed such a bat in the major leagues, he was a defensive first player, but he was a leader. He was a grinder. I think he was a great clubhouse guy. That he managed played
for more than a decade.
Yeah, playing into his age 36 season. He talked about maybe hanging it up during the last offseason, but signed with Texas, and had a few games where the things were looking good, but ultimately failed to sort of catch on. And I think this isn't the last we've seen of Kevin Pulver. Let me put it that way.
No, he is already on Canadian TV.
Yeah, whether it's going to be broadcasting or coaching in some capacity, I think he is a guy who smart, charismatic,
likes to be around the game.
Yeah, absolutely. He went to university, so I feel like that's a leg up as far as baseball players go. No, I just mean like you know what I mean. Like he went to Cal State. Like it's not. He has a head on his shoulders, and I just think there's a lot of potential for him. I hope he's good. I hope I think we will see him.
I think we'll see him at the World Baseball Classic.
Yeah, I think we'll see him at the World Baseball Classic.
Yeah.
He said that regardless of whether or not he's retired or not, he'll be there. I assume,
and he's going to play in the fall, not qualifying, but the tune-up games. I think
the tune-up games. Yeah, so exciting to see Kevin and keep an eye on him in terms of Israel baseball this year. And yeah, hopefully seeing him on Sportsnet in Canada as a commentator and seeing what he does in the future, I think is really exciting. So it's not the end of Kevin Pulver's time in our lives. And
we can't. A Dybbuk doesn't just go away. A Dybbuk hangs around. A Dybbuk is there.
And while we're wishing him a fond farewell, we should say a mazel tov and congratulations to Max Fried and Alex Bregman, who both made the American League All-Star team.
Friend of the podcast, Alex Bregman.
That's right. So we start with Alex. I mean, unfortunately, he's been injured for most of the last month. I think I don't know if he's played. I don't think he played at all in June.
It's been about 6 weeks.
Yeah, but hopefully he's back soon. I don't know if he's going to be playing in the All-Star game. I would doubt it, given even if he's coming back from injury or whatever. Then that would be a weird time to be trotting out. But if he comes back in the next week or so, that'd be great. Or comes back after the All-Star break. But Alex was on fire before he got hurt. He's hitting about 300. He had 11 home runs on the season again through 51 games. So, you can project that out. It's about a 35 home run pace. Playing decent defense and contributing to a Boston team at the time. Whether that continues down the stretch, I guess we'll see. Boston's still in contention for a wild card spot. They're not that far behind. Would be crazy if the AL East had 4 teams in the playoffs, but it's crazy. It's baseball. Crazier things have happened.
Crazier things have happened.
So we'll see.
We'll
see. I think
possible.
he's been roundly embraced by the Boston fans, and Max Fried
might be the best pitcher in baseball.
Yeah, continuing on what was a great trend the last few years. He's basically pitching to a sub-3 ERA since his breakout season in 2020, which is amazing. He
spent a large part of the first half of the season hovering around a sub-2 ERA, which is even more amazing.
He's leading, not that it really matters that much. Smart ball fans know wins don't matter, but he is leading the league in wins. So we'll say they do matter. He's 11-2. He's 11-2. He's got 2.27 ERA. I mean, he's just going out there and, not getting hit at all. Like he is just missing bats left, right, and center. And it's something to see. We saw him play the Jays last week. Yeah, actually, I had his worst game against the Jays. Sorry, his worst game in a while was against the Jays. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was not so bad. He gave up 4 runs in 6 innings. That's not, that can keep you in a lot of ball games. So that was the pretty much the worst game he's had this season. I think he got beat up by the Dodgers once. Yeah.
Yeah, he's had a terrific year, and he absolutely deserves the All-Star nod. So a big mazel tov to Max and Alex on that.
Yeah. And, I think we as Jewish sports fans, as Israel baseball fans, are excited to see what happens with the WBC roster. I don't think
we know that Alex is in the group chat, and we know he's being asked.
Yeah. So whether there is a decision by Max to join Team Israel, I think, that's pretty lofty goal, given that he would probably be I don't know, number 2 or number
Ace
3
of Team
starter.
USA.
Yeah, like, maybe not. I don't know. I'd probably give Skeens the first start, but regardless, he's got a spot on Team USA, I would think, if he wants it. Choosing to start for Team Israel as well instead would be I wouldn't say a sacrifice, but it would be an exceptional thing for him to do. A very menschlichkeit thing for Max Fried to do. We absolutely encourage him to do it. I think he knows that it's available to him at this point. So
I think
maybe Bregman can work on him at the All-Star game.
If we're fantasizing about that now, I think it's likely that, unless he has a terrific second half, Dylan Cease might have that choice to make.
That's true.
Might not quite crack Team USA, but has the opportunity to play for Team Israel as he's got Jewish grandparents.
Yep.
And we could possibly see that. The same could be true of Paul Goldschmidt. He may not be on Team USA anymore, and he's still good.
Yeah, I think I would be pretty surprised about Goldschmidt. I mean, he is someone we have sort of touched on here and there. His dad is Jewish, but he was raised Catholic. He's talked about, his, again, I think his grandparents fled Nazi Germany. Like it wasn't.
Yeah, I think his grandparents were survivors.
Yeah, I think his grandparents or great grandparents are survivors. So he's talked about it. He knows his Jewish history and all that. But grew up Catholic, hasn't really talked about connection with Judaism that much. He's had a long career and lots of opportunities to do it.
Israel.
Yeah, but, again, if he chooses to do it, if he chooses to play for Team Israel, I would not be upset. I would fully embrace Paul Goldschmidt. Again, taking advantage of the rules, play for Team Israel next year. We're gonna see. We're gonna see in the next couple months. I hope getting that roster together and hopefully we can have someone on from Team Israel talk about what's getting together here.
Our good friends at Team Israel. Get Spencer back. Catch up with him about motivational books.
Speaking of that, I should say it was recently announced that Dean Kramer is going to be rejoining the team next year. He announced formally that he's going to be back for 2026. Pretty exciting to see. It's been a sort of up and down year for Dean, pitching about a 4.5 ERA.
And the Orioles altogether.
Yeah, the Orioles are a tough team to watch right now. So he's doing his best to stick in there. Tough to be playing out the stretch the last 70 games on a losing season, but Dean is a big part of their team and has been for a while. He's their ace as much as anyone is this year. But again, it's been a tough year for the Orioles all around. But exciting to have Dean back formally. I think the Team Israel WBC team, it's going to be good. It's going to be pretty good. It's going to be
they're going to contend.
They're going to contend. They're going to surprise some people as they always do.
Could easily be 26 major leaguers. Totally possible.
Maybe former and future could be pretty close. Anyways, that's pretty exciting stuff going on in the world of Jewish sports news. Let's move now to our interview with Nick.
On the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz comes an unprecedented exhibition about one of history's darkest moments. Auschwitz, not long ago, not far away, features more than 500 original objects, first-hand accounts, and survivor testimonies that tell the powerful story of the Auschwitz concentration camp, its history and legacy, and the underlying conditions that allowed the Holocaust to happen. On now exclusively at ROM. Tickets at rom.ca.
Very excited to be joined tonight by Nick Agar Johnson. Nick is the editor-in-chief, I believe.
Yes, sir.
Of No Ceilings NBA, a podcast and website dedicated to NBA draft topics. Nick is joining us tonight because of a very Jewish NBA draft. A rare 2 Jews were picked in the first round. And we want to talk to somebody about who knows a little bit more about basketball prospecting than we do. So Nick, let's start with the first pick. What can you tell us? What can you tell our listeners about Ben Saraf?
Absolutely. So first of all, thank you so much for having me on the show. Second of all, to start with Ben Saraf, he is a fascinating player, one of the more interesting picks in the international crew. He, interestingly enough, played for Ratio Farm Ulm and therefore actually missed the draft because he was still playing for Ratio Farm Ulm in the German League finals at the time of the draft. His teammate Noah Senge decided to make the flight out to Brooklyn for the draft, and Ben decided to keep playing. But in terms of what Ben brings to the table, he's a fantastic driver to the rim. He puts a lot of pressure on the basket. He's a really good passer for his size. He measured in at 6'6" barefoot. So, given that you play basketball in shoes, he'll be 6'7", 6'8" in terms of when he gets on the court. So, he's someone who, again, like a lot of the players that the Nets picked in this draft, including the other Jewish player that we're about to talk about in a little bit, he does his best work with the ball in his hands. So it'll be fascinating to see sort of how that works out for the Nets. But, Saraf had a 20-point game in the finals against Bayern Munich as a just turned 19-year-old. So he's someone who sort of combines the maturity of his game with his ability to attack the rim and, has played pretty high professional level basketball already. The biggest knock on him at this point is his 3-point shooting, which is less of a problem given his size than it would be for a slightly smaller guard. But, in terms of sort of his longer term profile, there are some defensive questions, but really a lot of his NBA value is going to be determined by how well he can shoot the basketball. There are positive indicators there. He shot 75% from the free throw line this year, which was a pretty significant tick up from last year where he shot 66% from the line. Okay. So, reasons to buy into the shooting improvement there. And we'll see in terms of sort of how he fits in with the Nets roster. Again, they just drafted a lot of guys who are at their best with the ball in their hands, which I think is an interesting follow forward from what we saw from the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Indiana Pacers in the NBA Finals this year, where both of those teams sort of relied on a lot of players who essentially they wanted to have 5 players on the floor who were comfortable with the ball in their hands at all times. So definitely seems like that strategy at least partially influenced what the Nets were looking to do in this draft, and Ben Saraf is one of the headliners of that.
Have you noticed any trend in terms of international players who aren't at the combine? Does it affect their draft stock at all, or is it if someone's playing pro, is there enough tape on him to get a real sense of how he's going to develop or what his measurables are?
So the effect on international players, I think, is larger just because there's been a trend in the last couple of years of international players going to U.S. colleges and signing NIL deals rather than, continuing their professional careers abroad.
I can't imagine the Bundesliga basketball league pays a 19-year-old very much, probably a living wage, but in the hundreds of thousands of euros, not millions, I would imagine.
Yeah, you're not getting $6 million a year to come off the bench for Rachel Farmel, even though he started for them. So a little bit more probably. But yeah, given that Florida dealt out multiple $1 million NIL deals to international players in the past couple weeks, he probably could have made a little bit more money coming over to play for Illinois or whatever. But hey, now he's an NBA draft pick and he signed his deal with Brooklyn 4 days ago as we were recording this. So he's got that money on lock now.
Summer League started today. Or maybe it was yesterday, but I think it was today. It was the first game. Are we going to see him in Summer League for the Nets?
I would assume that we see both Ben Saraf and Danny Wolf, who we haven't touched on yet. I assume that both of them will be in Las Vegas. So the Summer League games that started, I believe it was yesterday, were in Utah. And I don't believe that Brooklyn is in Utah for that Summer League. But certainly when Las Vegas Summer League starts on Thursday the 10th, I presume that one or both of them will be there. Certainly Danny Wolf will be there. Ben, they might not play just because he only just finished his professional season, whereas Danny Wolf has, gotten to sit and hang out for a little while longer. So I would be a lot more surprised if he is not there in Las Vegas than if Saraf is not there.
Danny had exams to write.
So tell us a little bit about Danny Wolf. He was I looked at your last, I think, big board mock draft before the draft, and you had him at 17. He obviously fell quite a bit in the first round. Some people were projecting him as a late lottery pick. Why do you think he fell, and what is it that NBA teams, I guess, are a little apprehensive about with Danny?
I think that the main reason that Danny Wolf fell is that he is not a player that we've really seen a lot of before. He's a 7-footer who the majority of his possessions last season were as the ball handler in the pick and roll. So not as the roll man, but having the ball in his hands. So, there aren't all that many 7-footers who have had the ball in their hands as much as Danny Wolf has, which, I think, especially given the Brooklyn Nets team that he's going to, if they manage to retain Nick Claxton, which there are rumors that he might be on the move in terms of a trade, but if Nick Claxton is a member of the Nets next season, he's a nearly perfect fit alongside Danny Wolf. Danny Wolf, he's got, I would say, shooting potential, not necessarily, really fully realized yet, but he did shoot 34% from 3-point range on a decent number of attempts last year. His
It's not
free throw
bad.
numbers have fluctuated throughout his college career. He shot 72% last season at Yale and then 59% this season at Michigan. So, given that he shot 63% his first year at Yale in limited minutes, I would presume it's probably closer to the 60s than the 70s range in terms of the free throw numbers.
Right.
But the three-point shooting, he's been hovering around low 30s three-point percentage. Really, with Danny Wolf, I think the questions are going to be, first of all, what does the defense look like? And that's why I would hope for both his and the Nets' sake that they retain Nick Claxton, because having Claxton as an incredible rim protector, really mobile big man will allow for a lot of coverage for Danny Wolf on the defensive end. And on the flip side, allow him to really show off his gifts on the offensive end, where he's not the kind of player that you see very often. You asked me to sort of provide comps for these two players heading into this, and let's just say it was a lot easier to find comps for Ben Saraf than it was to find comps for Danny Wolf.
As Torontonians, we lived through the Andrea Bargnani experience, and that's
a 7-footer who was very unconventional and didn't know how to
play without the ball.
Couldn't play defense for sure.
Yeah.
So, I'm a little afraid for Danny's sake from that, but I think it's a very different game. People have talked about a lot that if Bargnani played in 2025 instead of 2005, he would have had a very, very different career. And I think that Wolf might be a good example of that.
The other thing is Danny Wolf also averaged a shade under 10 rebounds in each of his last two seasons. Yep. Rebounding was not exactly Bargnani's strong suit, but that's something Danny Wolf can do. So
it's interesting because something you said before is that, teams are looking for put 5 guys on the floor who can all thrive with the ball in their hands. And so it seems a bit odd to me. I mean, you have a 7-footer who, regardless of his problems on defense, you can teach him on that. This is a hokey thing to say at this point, but you can't, the old saying that you can't teach height still remains true. You can't teach a guy to be 7 feet tall. When Danny Wolf's on the floor, he more often than not, almost all the time, he's going to be the tallest guy on the floor. He's going to be defending someone shorter than him. There aren't that many 7-footers in the NBA. There aren't that many 7-footers in the world. So it seems to me that just like you have a guy who can at least stand there, clog up the middle, stop people from driving at least a little bit, and then on the other end, be either end of a pick and roll is that's a rare skill. So I do have a question here, which is that is part of the difficulty in drafting him the lack of comps or the lack of, the we haven't seen this before? Is it just, GMs or team scouting departments, whatever, saying, we don't know how this is going to work. There's too much risk here. There's too much, there's too much unknown.
Yeah, I think it's two things. I think first of all, there's definitely an element of the fact that there haven't been many players like him in the NBA before, which makes it a little bit more difficult to sort of make the case for someone that we haven't really seen that much of before. I think the other element is that, especially in the last few years, there have been a lot more responsibility for big men to be sort of more mobile defenders rather than just, guys stationed around the basket. So that might be a factor as well. I mean, it's not that Danny Wolf is a bad defender when he's around the rim. It's really just, sort of the flip side of his very odd game is that he doesn't do well when he's put into pick and rolls defensively, where he has to, sort of move with the ball handler. So I could see that being an element of it, certainly. But, in terms of the element of how much these guys are going to have the ball in their hands, the good news on that front is that Egor Demin, who was the first pick that Brooklyn made in the first round at number 8, he's someone who is looking to get others involved more than he is to shoot himself. And similarly, I mean, Nolan Traore, who they picked at 19, is also someone who is very, very willing to pass. So I think of the guys that the Nets took, Danny Wolf might be one of the more willing to actually shoot when he gets the ball in his hands. And especially since there are shooting concerns with a lot of the other picks that Brooklyn took in the first round, 5 of their picks, I definitely think that Danny Wolf is more likely to be sort of heavily involved in the offense than Ben Saraf, at least early on. But that's in part because 1, his shooting is further along, and 2, shooting is a less critical part of his profile than it is for a wing/guard like Saraf.
So you mentioned that, all the picks. We expect there are some people listening to this podcast who may not be so familiar with the Brooklyn Nets or the NBA until now. How often is it that a team gets 5 picks in the first round?
If I remember correctly, this is the first time in NBA history that a team has made 5 selections in the first round and not traded any of them. So very, very rare, to the point where it's never been done before.
They're a young team.
Yes. Well, the other thing that's interesting is that the Nets headed into this season with more, or this offseason rather, with more cap space than any other team. So that led to them absorbing quite a lot of salary in Michael Porter Jr. when they traded Cam Johnson for Michael Porter Jr. So that might mean that even though a lot of the free agency wheeling and dealing is done at this point in the offseason, there's still a possibility for the Nets to make a couple more moves to sort of absorb salary, because they're essentially, maybe I think the only team at this point that might be able to take on additional salary in a trade. So that'll definitely be left to see in terms of, whether there are more changes coming for Brooklyn, but certainly they are emphasizing the youth movement with not only having 5 first-round picks, but keeping all of them at this point.
I can only imagine that the changes to the CBA in the last couple of years and all the machinations of the apron, second apron, the soft cap that's really a hard cap, and all, every team should be employing like 6 more accountants than they were before, because as a casual NBA fan, it is impossible to wrap your head around it. And it's just insane that it's like the Brooklyn Nets are not going to be particularly good this year. But it's like, well, their value could be that they can be a salary dumper. Like they could trade Cam Thomas, who is probably their best player, even though he's not going to be somebody else's best player, and just absorb more salary on a bad contract. Is like such a fascinating idea, such a weird thing. But it's like, then, you have to hit the salary floor. Like it does seem like the Nets could just like, all right, let's run with the young guys. Let's Nick Claxton and a few rookies, and let's see how it goes, and see who, see what sticks against the wall. But it's like, even that, it's like hard to do. Like it's hard to get a completely young team without having some big salaries on your roster that are going to take some minutes up too. Just going to say, you're from New York originally. Do you think New York Jews are excited about the Nets? I mean, I think of the Knicks as being the number one team in New York by a significant stretch. But are people going to be changing allegiances? Is there something for Jewish sports fans to be excited about here?
I would say that the Brooklyn Jews might be willing to change alliances. I mean, the thing with the New York basketball teams is I moved out of New York after the Nets moved into Brooklyn, but
Sure.
7 years ago at this point. But when I left New York City and moved out to the West Coast, there was definitely still a very strong element that it's a Knicks town, and a lot of the Nets fans are still New Jersey people. So certainly New Jersey Jews might be looped back in. One of my best friends from college is a Jew from New Jersey who was a Nets fan, and so I think he might be more invested in the team next season than this season's version. But certainly what the Nets are going to be looking to do is to get all their young players a lot of minutes and probably be pretty bad and be mostly fine with that. And maybe come trade deadline time, they're sort of a dumping ground for bad salary to pick up future assets. But definitely Saraf and Danny Wolf are going to get plenty of opportunities, because there are plenty of opportunities to be had on this team.
I mean, that's a good thing. It seems like no one is ever sure how the Euro League to North America experiment goes. I mean, you expect guys to come from, there's, diamonds in the rough. There's your Lucas and your Dirks every now and again. But people who aren't sickos don't follow much German basketball. So to hear about Ben Saraf as maybe he's a project and maybe he's the diamond in the rough that every team has been looking for. We all we can do is our best guess.
Yeah, I mean, the difference with Saraf and a lot of other sort of European diamonds in the rough / lottery roles is that he did actually play a significant amount of minutes. I mean,
right.
Going back a ways, a lot of the European players that did not do as well when they made it over to the NBA were guys like, say, Dragan Bender, who did not play very much for Maccabi Tel Aviv. I mean, Ben Saraf was starting for a German league team that made it to the finals, right? He's someone who not only, is he's coming over from Europe, but he's not coming from playing, 5 minutes a game in Europe, right? He's someone who was an established part of the rotation as a teenager, which is a little bit more rare. And usually those players have a higher hit rate than the guys who were sort of shots in the dark, who didn't really play all that much for their previous professional team.
Very interesting. Well, we'll let you go, Nick. Thanks so much for joining us and giving us some insight into these NBA prospects. It's such I don't want to say crapshoot. All these teams spend so much money investigating these people. There's tons of bloggers like you, and podcasters like you guys who are, really giving us an inside scoop on these people. But it's so hard. It's so hard to know what's going to work and what's not. And it's always so funny because it's like every year there's guys picked in the top 5 who wash out within 5 years, go back to Europe in 5 years, or go there, or end up on Maccabi Tel Aviv or something like that. So it's interesting to hear these insights, and there's no proof like actually seeing these guys play at an NBA level. I think Jewish sports fans are really excited to see what the Nets look like with two Jewish guys on the floor.
For the first time ever, the Nets might have a more Jewish starting lineup ratio than fandom, which would be a real twist at 40%. But speaking of, your incredible insights, Nick, where can our listeners find you?
Well, thanks again for having me. Your listeners can find me on Blue Sky at NBA Johnson, and you can also find all of my written work on NoCeilingsNBA.com. Also, the No Ceilings NBA podcast. We're covering the draft year round on both the website and podcast. The website has a little bit more of my touch on it, seeing as I'm the editor-in-chief. I kind of part of my job to make sure that all the written work is as good as it can be. But we have wonderful writers on staff at No Ceilings NBA. And if you're interested in the NBA draft, whether it be for the couple weeks leading up to the draft, or if you're one of the sickos who's interested in the draft year-round, it's a ton of fun for us. I mean, part of the fun for me, and I'd like to think most people who are regularly involved in the NBA draft, is the sort of element of surprise that, people sort of have this general notion going in of what things might look like. And, some of these guys end up not working out that great, and some of these guys end up succeeding past all expectations. So it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of chaos, and we're covering it over at No Ceilings NBA all year round.
Is your goal to be the first hit when somebody Googles NBA Johnson over Magic?
Well, that has been my handle for many years, mostly because, hey, my initials NBA, and then go with the Johnson, right? So,
that's great.
It's a pun, which certainly my Jewish family definitely approves of the punniness of my relatively limited social media presence. So there you have it.
All right, thanks again, Nick. Thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much to Nick for that. It's whatever the reverse Mike Jacobs All-Star is. We don't get a lot of Jewish people named Nick Johnson, so I'm thrilled to have him on the show just for a little diversity in that sense.
That's right. We should say that Michael initially reached out to one of his colleagues whose last name is Baumbach, who turned out not to be Jewish. Which is always funny because, Gabe, so much of what we do is like trying to figure out who the Jews are who haven't been publicly identified as being Jewish, I guess. And it's like, I'm never looking at the Johnsons being like, I wonder if this is one of the Jewish Johnsons. Right. And sometimes they are.
Sometimes they are. Exactly.
Sometimes they are. Look, I've known Jews. Whatever, we've had Jewish Smiths and Kellys and all kinds of things. So
you know what? The Yankees have a pitcher who's a non-Jewish Hartlieb.
Right.
So anything's possible there too.
Anything's possible. But yeah, thanks so much for Nick for joining us. Exciting stuff in Brooklyn. Get your. We should say Danny Wolf going to be wearing 18. Ben Saraf going to be wearing 77. Not a typical basketball number, but symbolic meaning for Jews, I think, and Israelis. So exciting stuff. Excited to see what happens in Brooklyn. Might not be the most watchable basketball, but we're going to be watching it anyways. And
yeah, we're going to be watching it anyway.
And see what's going on
I think seeing a team really try and figure it out live, especially one with sort of as exciting of a brand and a culture as the Nets, I think that's going to be pretty cool.
Yeah. Just in terms of just a little housekeeping, I am expecting a child in a few weeks. So it might be.
Oh my God. Good for you. Mazel tov.
Yeah. Thanks, Gabe. Thanks. It might be a little while before the Mentorums are back in your podcast space. But we'll keep you advised of that, and definitely get back in the studio, do some NFL preview, MLB playoffs. What's coming up? Sort of the dog days of summer. I don't know what's left in the calendar after the British
F1
Open.
Still going on. Maybe Lance Stroll will have to do an emergency podcast because Lance Stroll will win a race.
I saw he had a 7th place finish last week. That's not bad. That's something.
He was actually in 3rd for a good chunk of the race, and then he sort of fell off at the end.
Okay. Well, if he wins an F1 race, which maybe people have seen the movie, they have more sense of what that means now. You call me. I'll even if we're in the hospital, I'll do a podcast with you.
We'll talk about Mr. Strulovich.
Yeah. Thanks for listening. As always, we're brought to you by the Canadian Jewish News. Our producer is Michael Freeman. And you can find us on Twitter at Menschwarmers, where we are tweeting about the NBA draft and Jewish sports excellence all the time. Thanks a lot.
On the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz comes an unprecedented exhibition about one of history's darkest moments. Auschwitz, Not Long Ago, Not Far Away, features more than 500 original objects, first-hand accounts, and survivor testimonies that tell the powerful story of the Auschwitz concentration camp, its history and legacy, and the underlying conditions that allowed the Holocaust to happen. On now exclusively at ROM. Tickets at rom.ca.